Anyway, brief time out, my friends. You sit tight. Much more straight ahead on the. I had a statistic wrong yesterday. I mentioned that the gay population, talking about the same-sex marriage oral arguments at the Supreme Court. Speaking of which, I didn't know this until today. They're really mad at Justice Scalia on the left because of a reaction he had to an anti-gay marriage protester that got into the court's oral arguments. Scalia's reaction to this guy when he stood up, the left is really mad about it, and I love it. Anyway, I was wrong about the percentage of the population that's gay. I way overestimated it. And how many of you watch the Sunday night TV show Madam Secretary? It stars Taya Leone as Hillary Clinton at Secretary of State. And Sunday night's episode, I'm still not sure I believe they did it. All that coming up after this. Don't go away. Okay, got to take a brief time, and I've got to get the phone calls. People have been waiting for an hour here. But no, I've not forgotten. There's the episode of Madam Secretary on Sunday night. I still don't believe they did it. But I'll tell you why they did. I know why. I still don't believe they did it. The subject matter and the conclusion of this episode. I'm kind of surprised it hasn't gotten any discussion in the entertainment media. And then I do want to revisit this idea that I've grossly exaggerated the percentage of the gay population in this country. I mistakenly said it's 5 or 6%, and it's maybe 2 tops. But now think about that for a second. And if you don't realize where I'm going, you don't have to. I will lead you there when we get back and continue. Now, Madam Secretary, I've teased this enough, and I didn't mean to tease it at all. Madam Secretary is a fictional show, fictitious show, stars Taya Leone as Secretary of State. I jokingly say that she's portraying Hillary Clinton. I don't know what the purpose of the program is. I thought at one point when the first show was first announced that it was an effort by virtue of a TV. You know how many people cite TV shows and movies when they want to tell you things that really happened? Oh, yeah, I saw it in a movie. Yeah, did you see this? And it ends up being real. So you do a TV show and you have a strong female character, big, strong Secretary of State. You might be trying to subliminally connect with the audience in a way to suggest that Mrs. Clinton's brilliant Secretary of State would make a great president. That might have been the purpose. I don't know. Anyway, I watch it now and then because I find it entertaining and it's good. Sunday night's episode was fascinating. In Sunday night's episode, the President of the United States was welcoming to Washington the President of Iran. And they were going to sign a treaty in which Iran was promising to not go nuke. At the same time that this ceremony was to happen, Iran was going to stone to death a militant gay individual who was being stoned to death simply because he was gay. And the Secretary of State, Taya Leone, was being blasted by friends of hers in the gay community who were going to protest the signing of the treaty with Iran because of the stoning of the gay man, which is an execution, on the same day. She was being lobbied, implored to do everything she could to see to it the president didn't sign this, to not go through with this because of the way Iran treats homosexuals. And she tried as best she could. She asked the Iranians to please move the day of the stoning so that it wouldn't take place on the day of the signing ceremony on the nuke deal. And this just enraged the gay lobby on this show even more. You telling me that it's okay if they stone our fellow homosexual just on a different day? How dare you? Do you know what happens during a stoning? And then they detailed it. And she gets very guilty and starts feeling very, very troubled by this and wishing she could undermine the signing ceremony, but she can't. She's Secretary of State. She takes steps. She does everything she can to try to get this not that, but it doesn't happen. And they go ahead and they sign the deal. This is the part of the show that just done it. They signed the deal. But if you watch this show, if you're a low information voter and you happen to be watching this show Sunday night, there is no way you could conclude that there's anything good about Iran and that there is no way we should be signing an Iranian nuke deal. And I'm watching this in total shock and dismay. I'm expecting just the opposite. But no, if you're a low information viewer and you watch this episode Sunday night, there is no way you could conclude that what Obama's doing is good if you have the mental powers to put two and two together. The Iranians were portrayed for what they really are. That we couldn't trust whatever they sign, that whatever they sign doesn't mean anything, that we can't trust them. Why are we doing it? The State Department wanted no part of this, but the president was going to do it for his legacy, for whatever. But the key was, the real reason it shouldn't have happened in this show was because the Iranians were stoning to death a gay man on the same day. And what the real takeaway for this is, in a battle of left-wing interest groups, on this program, the gay lobby won. Because on this episode, the real reason Iran looked bad is not because they're going to do nukes, and not because they're dishonest, but because they stoned to death a gay individual. That was why we shouldn't have done the Iran deal, not because of nukes, not because we can't trust them. So I'm imagining this program being written, and I'm imagining the competing forces in the writer's room putting this episode together. Because I first can't believe that the episode even ran. This episode, if you have any modicum of intelligence watching it, and you're aware that we are engaged in a nuclear negotiation with Iran, there's no way, if you know that, there's no way that you would support Obama going forth if that show made an impression on you. You would hate the Iranians. You wouldn't trust them. You wouldn't trust the president dealing with it. You'd think you're being lied to by the media about all of it. And it was that powerful an episode. The end of that episode, it was clear to anybody watching that any deal with Iran is a huge mistake on a whole number of levels. But the worst aspect was that they murder gay people. So the gay lobby is extremely, the militant, the political extreme gay lobby, very, very powerful in Hollywood. And it's why I've also made mention of the fact that I vastly overestimated the percentage of the population of this country that's gay. I said yesterday it was 5 or 6%. And it turns out that it's barely 2%. This is Gallup, by the way. And furthermore, there's this. According to a recent Gallup survey, the total U.S. adult population, 243 million adults, less than 1% of the total U.S. adult population are part of a same-sex couple. 0.8%, approximately 2 million adults at the top, the outside, the biggest possible number, 2 million are part of a same-sex couple out of 243 million Americans. Now, let me ask you a question before I go to the break. Let's take two numbers. The overall gay population, 2%. And by the way, not all of them are militant and not all of them are leftists. Not all of them are political. The gay population is like any other group. They got people who don't care about politics. They got people that don't want to be known, seen, any of that. They have people that don't want to live and let live. They're not part of any activists. Just like every other group you would take of any population, there's a cross-section of people in it. It's often thought that the entire gay population is militant and leftist and rich and active, and it's not the case. So the numbers are even smaller. Population, 2%, the percentage of U.S. adults that are part of a same-sex couple is less than 1%. And again, not all of those are political activists involved in Democrat Party and Washington politics to affect change. And yet, this is my question for you. How? Let's just round the number up and let's use one. How can 1% of the population accomplish what it is accomplishing? How can that happen? 1%, rounding it up, of the population is part of a same-sex couple. Not all of them want to get married. It's even smaller. The percentage of adults who want to get same-sex couples that want to get married, 0.5%. And yet, look at what they are accomplishing. How are they doing it? How can 1% of the population cause what is happening now? How can 1% of the population end up ruining and destroying an innocent little family in Indiana that owns a pizza shop? Or close down a bakery in Oregon? Or Colorado? Or a flower shop in San Diego? Or you name it. How can less than 1% of the population succeed in getting the whole concept of redefining marriage all the way to the Supreme Court? How can less than 1% of the population do that? You think about that. Take a break and be back after this. Don't go away. And back we are, just as I said we would be. Rush Limbaugh on the EIB Network. Great to have you. Our telephone number, if you want to be on the program, 800-282-2882, and the email address lrushbaugh@eibnet.com. Now, I'm not going to answer the question fully. I'm going to hear what some of you out there happen to think about this, even if it takes us into Open Line Friday tomorrow. But I'm going to give you one hint. Just one. But it is by no means the answer. I mean, there is an answer to the question. Maybe more than one, but there's one primary answer to it. And maybe two good ones, but there's one primary. Here's the question again. Less than 1% of the adult population is part of a same-sex couple. There are 243 million adults in America, and 0.8% of them, about 2 million, are part of a same-sex couple. Now, by no means do all of them want to get married. Just like in the heterosexual population, people don't want to get married. There are gay couples, there are gay singles that don't want to get married. My point is that by the time you winnow it down to the actual percentage of gay couples that want to get married and are politically active in the movement, you're talking about a number so small, as expressed as a percentage of the population, as to be unbelievable. Yet, despite that, everything they want politically, they're getting. How can that be? How can, let's just use, how can, what do you think the number of actual militant, political, homosexual gay marriage activists are there? 1 million? 500,000? I mean, how many gay weddings have there been? Pick a number. It's no more than 1 million. So let's use it. How can 1 million people, you're talking about a minority, how can 1 million people bring something as old as hundreds of millions of years, hundreds of thousands of years, whatever, the definition of marriage, to the Supreme Court to get it changed? How can and does that happen? Or if it isn't gay marriage, whatever else they want, how in the world can less than 1 million people in this country succeed in shutting down places of business like bakeries and flower shops and photo shops? Take your pick. Pizzerias. How can this happen? How does it happen? One element of the answer is something that we exposed on the EIB network some time ago. I went back to the archives of the Rush Limbaugh program at rushlimbaugh.com, and I remembered I had a story that detailed what the American people thought the population of the country was, the percentage of population was gay. And the story was, and this is part of the answer, a majority of Americans think that the gay population is 13 times higher than it is. Young Americans, millennials especially, under 35, believe that 30% of the American population is gay. If you have forgotten this story, I'm glad I went back to the archives and found it. 30% of millennials, people under 35, believe that 30% of the population is gay. Maximum 2% is. Census, and there's any number of studies that have been done. Nobody disputes. Well, the militant gays dispute it, and that's part and parcel of what they do. But if, for example, if you think that 30% of the population is gay, well, that's a pretty sizable. 30% of 240 million is a big number to discriminate against. If 30% of 240 million want something that's being denied them and you think it's unfair, you'll support them. It's unfair. The majority ought to yield here. Because by the time you start talking 30% of the population is gay, why that's approaching what some people might say is pretty normal. That's not that odd. It's a far different reaction when you tell people the population that's gay is 2. It's actually 2.3%, so round it up to 2, just to use even numbers here. The average American believes the gay population is 13 times higher than it really is. And part of that is the media, not leaving them out of the answer here. But the media can't do it alone. They have to have people that allow them to make this mistake. I mean, they're all employees there. We had a caller talk about market share. Wait a minute, Rush, the percentage of the population is one thing. What about market share? He said the market share for the proposition that big government, the answer to everything is 95%. I remember a caller calling in, your percentages don't work, Rush. You got to ask what percentage of the population believe government should do everything. And lump the homosexual community into that. Well, that's a whole different argument, but it's all part and parcel of creating a false picture, image, narrative, template, what have you. So if you are in the group that believes 30% of the American population is homosexual, understand that that's not correct. The number is 2.3%. And then the number of homosexuals who are in same-sex relationships, according to Gallup, is 0.8%. 2 million people, roughly, is what we're at. Again, not all of them are by any means activists, rabble-rousers, agitators, what have you. So part of the answer to the question, how can they do it, is when the American people think there's a lot of them. Okay, now you know that the number is very small. So how does this happen? Now, moving on to, other things. Let's get to this political story on the Clintons, because it's big. I mean, the lot of drive-by media outlets are really worried about this. They're worried about the Peter Schweitzer book. They're worried about Hillary's emails in the servers. They're worried. This is sticking. There are some people in the media terribly worried about this. And what's also, I think, obvious now is that there is not, as there was with Obama, there is not uniformity in the media supporting Hillary. She does not have blanket support in the media for her presidency, for her campaign. There are plenty of them that want somebody else. Some of them want Elizabeth Warren. Some of them are going to want this O'Malley guy. And I'm telling you, keep an eye on Jim Here's Art, Russellville, Arkansas. Glad to hear you, Art. Thank you for calling. Hello. Is Art there?
Okay.
Yeah. Hi, Art. How are you?
In answer to your question as to why the small percentage gets a big piece of the pie, it's big business and it's capitalism at its best. You create a victim society, you create a group, and you make big money. Hence the Bill, Hillary, and Chelsea Foundation.
What's the Bill and Hillary Foundation have to do with the percentage of gay people in the country?
Well, just another victim group like American Indians, the black community, rape victims, natural disasters.
Wait. See, that's you're calling this capitalism, and that's interesting. But every group you just mentioned dwarfs the gay population. I mean, there are far more of almost every group except a couple that you mentioned that dwarf the numbers of gay people in America. And yet, I mean, the gay population is getting more of their agenda advanced politically than the Christian majority is, for example. Now, you want to say it's money and capitalism. Money is power, and I don't refute that. That's clearly part of it. But there have to be other things going on in order for all of that to work.